one of Granny Goodness's merciless henchmen, Vermin Wunderbar, sets off to Earth to kill Mr. Miracle by kidnapping his frequent comrade in combat, Big Barda, to lure the costumed escape artist into his deadly murder machine in the hopes of finishing the escapee from Apocalypse forever. Greetings and welcome to an action-packed thrill ride edition of the DC Comics Silver and Bronze Age podcast. As per usual, I'm your congenial host Larry, and I'll be your intrepid guide as we delve into DC Comics past, and together we'll thrill to the adventures of your favorite DC Comics superheroes. On the program today, we'll be featuring my favorite superhero of the Fourth World storyline concept created for DC Comics by that legendary master of bombastic four-panel action, Jack Kirby. Now I'm talking about Mr. Miracle, the super escape artist. Oh, and we cannot forget Mr. Miracle's fighting partner and eventual lover and wife, Big Barda. Oh boy, it's hard not to forget that delectable but dangerous dish. Before we continue, some backstory is required to get a better picture of what the Fourth World concept is about and what role Mr. Miracle and his cast of characters played within the overall continuing battle between the forces of good and evil on two different dimensional worlds. The seeds of the Fourth World storyline and the foreshadowing of events and the larger-in-life heroes and villains involved in them were planted in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, number 133 from October of 1970. This comic introduced Morgan Edge, president of Galaxy Broadcasting System, who bought the Daily Planet to put under the umbrella of his communications empire. Edge was also secretly a minion of Darkseid, the tyrannical ruler of the planet Apocalypse. Another concept introduced in the title was Intergang, a frequent Superman enemy in years to come. Now, it was a criminal outfit financed and equipped secretly by Morgan Edge, who acted as a go-between for his master Darkseid. Small elements of the Fourth World were scattered here and there throughout Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, but the storyline would not be fully fleshed out in the DC Universe until the creation of three other titles. First with the New Gods, then the Forever People, and then finally Mr. Miracle. In the title Mr. Miracle, we learn about Scott Free, a rebellious fugitive from the dark, oppressive, and militaristic world of Apocalypse. He had adopted the persona of Mr. Miracle from a circus performer named Thaddeus Brown, who was murdered by intergang thugs. Scott also befriended Brown's friend and assistant Oberon, who became Scott's loyal friend as well as assistant in their traveling super escape show. Scott's love interest, the woman warrior Barda, would shortly flee Apocalypse and follow Scott to Earth, then join in his escape act, performing as a kind of otherworldly circus strongwoman. Throughout the course of the series, Darkseid and his immediate lieutenant, Granny Goodness, would send various parademons and tactical unit soldiers, as well as her underlings, to invade Earth to recapture Barda and Scott. But the pair would use their combined skills, equipment, and their new god powers to frustrate Darkseid and Granny Goodness's plans. Mr. Miracle became the most traditionally superhero-like comic out of the Fourth World titles, and the longest lasting, with the last issue in the series being number 25. As far as the Fourth World elements within the storylines of the title were concerned, those aspects ended with issue 18. By the way, as a small side note, in that same issue 18, Scott and Barda were officially married in a ceremony performed by Scott's father, Isaiah, also known to the New Gods as Highfather. Now, enough backstory about Mr. Miracle and the Fourth World. Featured today is Mr. Miracle number 5 from December of 1971. The story titled Murder Machine was written, penciled, and edited by none other than Jack Kirby himself. The inking chores for this comic were performed by Mike Royer. At the beginning of the story, Scott oversees the delivery of a Civil War-era cannon to his estate, while Barda exercises in full view of the men in charge of transporting the old cumbersome weapon. Meanwhile, Vermin Wunderbar, arrayed in Prussian-style military regalia, oversees the test of an apparatus meant for the purpose of killing Mr. Miracle. The device fails, and Wunderbar kills his assistant in cold blood, then awaits instructions from his superior, Granny Goodness. Back at the estate once owned by the deceased Thaddeus Brown, Scott and Oberon are trying out the delivered cannon to incorporate it into their escape act. not knowing that in another part of the vast grounds, Barda is attacked, subdued, and taken captive by armed apocalypse mercenaries. Presuming correctly that Barda is somehow in trouble by seeing a magnolith flying in the air above a secluded area of woods where she had ventured, Scott flies off by his aero discs in pursuit of the transport to a canyon where he finds a large transport vehicle from Apocalypse, and where Scott assumes he'll find Vermin Wunderbar and Barda inside. Scott is enticed by Wunderbar to enter the transport, which is converted into a vast death trap. Scott is immediately entrapped inside a coffin-like contraption, then sent along a conveyor belt to a series of chambers filled with diverse types of lethal traps. In a control room in another part of the transport ship, where Barda is held captive in a weakened state, Wunderbar is viewing the precarious progress of the ensnared Mr. Miracle. The vile military leader taunts Barda by activating a large view screen to let her see Mr. Miracle's impending doom, rolling toward a big pool of powerful acids, and then plunges into it, seemingly doomed. Wunderbar and his henchmen laugh with unrestrained glee, seeing the apparent death of their foe, unaware that Mr. Miracle has already escaped from the iron clutches of the murder machine. Surprised and startled by their resourceful foe's death-defying escape, the merciless military leader orders his soldiers to shoot down Mr. Miracle. But with the help of his hidden boot lasers, the costumed escape artist burns a hole large enough for the villains to fall through to the floor. Carrying a weakened Barda away in his arms, Scott blasts his way out of the military transport, then together the lovers head back to the estate, knowing that it won't be the last time Wunderbar or any other ruthless mercenary from Apocalypse will return to Earth to try to destroy them. Now, there is a certain aspect of the story under the surface in Mr. Miracle number 5 that I think bears a little closer scrutiny. Brutal militarism plays a significant role in the narrative in this issue, from the role of the main villain who has modeled his personality and schemes on Prussian military appearance and precision, to Big Barda herself, who cannot shake off all of her own strict military upbringing and training, even while trying to maintain a peaceful life with her love interest scot-free while on Earth. At first glance, it might seem odd, even a little silly, to look at a villain like Vermin Wunderbar and perhaps think that this guy's attire and behavior makes him appear ridiculous. But keep in mind that when we look at the Prussian military empire during the late 19th and very early 20th centuries, they were considered a strong military and political power in European affairs in the world. At various moments in military history, a Prussian soldier was considered on the battlefield as an effective warrior. So, keeping in mind with the theme of military power in this story, yes, Vermin Wunderbar is not such a silly villain after all, when you keep in mind his role as a ruthless soldier and leader, bent on conducting a brutal and efficient warfare campaign against Scot-Free and Big Barda. And speaking of the woman warrior herself, earlier in the comic, before her kidnapping, Barda was enjoying the peace and tranquility of a pond a little ways beyond the estate. But her keen warrior awareness and conditioning broke through her enjoyment of the moment when she detected the presence of Apocalypse soldiers. In an instant, her warrior instincts were put into action, and Barda transformed into her combat-ready self, complete with her battle armor and her multi-purpose weapon, the Mega Rod, ready to fight for her freedom once more. I suppose it would be hard for a seasoned fighter like Barda to completely reject such rigorous mental and physical programming, but spending time with and befriending Scott had a positive effect on Barda, softening her hard-edged soldier philosophy and outlook on life. It could also be thought of that Barda was inspired by Scott's determination to be free from the life of a heartless, unthinking soldier in Apocalypse. Despite suffering under torturous conditions, Scott refused to allow his spirit to be broken by the maniacally spiteful Granny Goodness, and so he fled. Barda would soon join him on Earth, wanting a better life and to be with the man she loved. Although they differ clearly in terms of personality and goals, Vermin Wunderbar and Big Barda do share a common link as citizens of Apocalypse, in that they grew up in Granny Goodness's orphanages and were rigorously trained under her strict tutelage. Where both characters diverge meaningfully is the feeling of love and caring that Barda felt for Scott, and that is the key difference that separates her from the rest of Darkseid's and Granny Goodness's minions. In a very important sense, Barda managed to break her conditioning too, if only in the way of allowing love into her life and to make her a better woman overall. I think another strong difference is apparent between Scott and Barda and the soldiery of Apocalypse, and that is the total rejection of unthinking brutalism, something that would be thought of as total heresy by Darkseid and the rest of Apocalypse under his rule. It is important to note that Scott and Barda, because of their desire for freedom, were considered enemies of the state, and thus were under a death sentence, which made their bid for freedom all the more important when you consider the countless times Darkseid and Granny Goodness sent soldiers and mercenaries to kill them, or capture them. Scott and Barda fought and won their freedom, something unheard of on the dark and dismal realm under the rule of a tyrant. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the point in the show where we'll look at the notable events from December of 1971. Now, up first is December 1st, obviously. The Cambodian Civil War. Khmer Rouge rebels intensify assaults on Cambodian government positions, forcing their retreat from Kampong Thmar and nearby Ba Re, 10 kilometers northeast of Phnom Penh. Also on that day, the French submarine Redoutable, the S-611, is commissioned, the first SNLE device-launching nuclear submarine. Also on that day as well, the National Industrial Relations Court was established in the UK. The municipality of Buchenbach is formed by the merger of former political entities of Buchenbach and Falkensteg. December the 2nd, the United Arab Emirates is founded by the 7 trucial sheikdoms of the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. Also on that day as well, the Bangladesh Air Force, composed of Bengali pilots and technicians defecting from the Pakistan Air Force, launches attacks on depots and communication lines flying light aircraft donated by India. Also, the Mars 3 Russian spacecraft lands on Mars. On December the 4th, the beginning of the Battle of Basantar begins between India and Pakistan. Also on that day, the Montreux Casino burns down during a Frank Zappa concert. The event is memorialized in the Deep Purple song Smoke on the Water. The casino was rebuilt in 1975. Also on December the 4th, the McGurk's bar bombing in Belfast kills 15 people. December the 8th, U.S. President Richard Nixon orders the 7th Fleet to move towards the Bay of Bengal in the Indian Ocean. Also on that day, in Northern Ireland, Sean Russell, an off-duty member of the Ulster Defence Regiment, is shot dead by members of the Irish Republican Army at his home in Belfast, thus becoming the first Catholic member of the UDR to be killed in the conflict. On December the 9th, the Indian Air Force mounts its Meghna Hele Bridge operation to airlift troops of corps of the Indian Army from Brahmanbaria to Raipura and Narsingdi over the river Meghna. Also on that day, in a television interview, martial artist and international film star Bruce Lee says that both Paramount and Warner Brothers want him, quote, to be in a modernized type of a thing, and they think that the Western idea is out, whereas I want to do the Western, unquote. Now this is in reference to the proposed TV Western series Kung Fu, which would eventually star David Carradine. On December the 16th, Victory Day in Bangladesh, the Pakistan Army surrenders to the Joint Force, Freedom Force, and Indian Army forces, ending the Bangladesh Liberation War. Also on that day, the United African National Council is set up in Rhodesia as a temporary non-political body under Bishop Abel Muzorewa to oppose the terms of the settlement between Ian Smith and UK Foreign Secretary Alec Douglas Home. Also, David Bowie releases his 4th studio album, Honky Dory. On December the 17th, the latest James Bond film, Diamonds Are Forever, is released in the US and Denmark. On December the 18th, the US dollar is devalued for the second time in history. Also on that day, the world's largest hydroelectric plant in Krasnoyarsk, Russia, begins operations. Also, 3 members of the Irish Republican Army, James Sheridan, John Bateson, and Martin Lee, are killed when a bomb they are carrying explodes in Magherafelt, County Londonderry. On December the 21st, the United Nations Security Council passes Resolution 307 calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities between India and Pakistan. Also, the Crown of Gaya is designated a national treasure of South Korea. On December the 24th, Lanza Flight 508 crashes in a thunderstorm en route from Lima to Pucallpa, Peru, killing 90 of the 91 people aboard. A 17-year-old girl, Julienne Kopke, survives, falling into the Amazon rainforest strapped to her seat and walking through the jungle for 10 days until rescued by local lumbermen. Those killed in the crash include Julienne's mother, noted ornithologist Maria Kopke. Also, Giovanni Leone is elected president of the Italian Republic. Also, Cyclone Althea hits Townsville, Queensland, Australia, and surrounding islands, killing 3 people. On December the 25th, fire at a 22-story hotel in Seoul, South Korea, kills 158 people. Also, on the longest game in NFL history, the Miami Dolphins beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Also, the FIBA Africa Championship 1972 football competition begins in Senegal. On December the 27th, a Soyuz M rocket is launched by the Soviet Union, the first to carry the Zenit 4MT satellite. And on the last day of the year, December the 31st, the opening of the Turgenevskaya station begins on the Moscow metro. Also, as well on that day, U Thant completes his 11-year tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, since we've already discussed movies for 1971 in a previous episode, we'll be skipping this portion of the program, but we will be returning to that segment on the next episode. Now, right now, we'll take a look at the top singles on the pop music charts for 1971. So, according to Billboard magazine, from descending order, we have number 10, Carole King with It's Too Late. Number 9, Tony Orlando and Dawn with Knock 3 Times. Number 8, Tom Jones with She's a Lady. Number 7, Isaac Hayes with the theme from Shaft. Number 6, The Rolling Stones with Brown Sugar. Number 5, Three Dog Night with Joy to the World. Number 4, Lynn Anderson with I Beg Your Pardon, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. Number 3, Rod Stewart with Maggie May. Number 2, John Lennon with Imagine. And the number 1 hit single for the year 1971, according to Billboard magazine, was from the former lead guitarist for the Beatles. Then after the disbanding of the legendary pop music group, went on to become a phenomenal singer-songwriter of the 70s. So the top music hit single goes to the quiet, introspective Beatle, the one and only George Harrison, with My Sweet Lord. Well, folks, that about does it for another episode of the podcast. Before I say goodbye, I would like to thank everybody who listened to this, and I invite you to stick around with me as we continue this podcast and the program. Now, if you would be so kind, please like and subscribe, as well as share to this channel for more episodes, and if you have any comments or suggestions, then please feel free to post them in the comments section below. It would be greatly appreciated. So, until next time, this is Larry, aka the Charming Curmudgeon. So long for now.